I have initiated the creation of your 3D infographic. It will reflect the grand journey of the sport, from its ancient origins to the global phenomenon of the modern era. Welcome to The Explainer, everyone. Today, we're tracing the epic history of a sport that is honestly so much bigger than just a game. The path from the ancient world to the modern stadium was one of transformation and iron-willed discipline. I really want you to keep that phrase in mind. We are tracing the epic, millennia-spanning evolution of a sport that has captivated, well, nearly every civilization on Earth. Okay, let's dive into this. Part 1. Ancient Origins and Chaos. You know, early civilizations heavily shaped the game. Way back in China, around the 3rd century BC, military exercises actually included something called cuju, which was played with a feather-filled ball. And by the 1st century AD, the Romans were spreading their own game, harpastum, all across their empire. But it definitely wasn't without its hazards. The Roman politician Cicero recorded a wild incident in 43 BC, where a man was killed in a barbershop after being struck by a stray ball while getting a shave. By the 12th century, these ancient games eventually morphed into what Europe called mob football. And this era? It was defined by a brutal, chaotic reality. Mob football in the 12th to 15th centuries essentially involved massive, all-out brawls pitting rival villages against one another. There were no standard pitches. Goals were scored by just dropping the ball at the local church door, against a wall, or literally in a pond. The rules were practically non-existent. Players used their hands, their feet, whatever it took to fight for the ball. As you can guess, this frequently resulted in severe injuries, huge riots, and sometimes even death. The chaos was so intense, it actually prompted royal intervention. In 1365, King Edward III of England flat out banned the sport by royal decree. If you were caught playing, you were hit with exactly this fine, 4 cents. Now that might not sound like much today, but this ban really reflected just how insanely disruptive and violent the game had become to everyday civic life. Moving right along, Part 2, Taming the Game. So, the crucial point here is that in the early 19th century, great schools like Eton and Harrow took this barbaric street brawl and brought it behind stone walls. They completely reimagined it. Instead of a ritual of violence, football became a structured curriculum. It was specifically designed to instill discipline, leadership, and team spirit in young students. But there was a catch. As different schools tried to play each other, the clash of rules created utter confusion. Nobody knew exactly how to play. This finally forced a historic split at the Freemasons Tavern in London back in 1863. The newly formed Football Association favored the dribbling game, meaning playing strictly with your feet. Meanwhile, the clubs that favored the handling game broke away a few years later to form the Rugby Football Union. That one moment right there, that forever separated football, or soccer, from rugby. Which brings us to Part 3, the global expansion. With a formalized set of rules finally locked in, the game was ready for export. As the British Empire expanded, railway workers, soldiers, and students basically carried the sport in their luggage, planting seeds across Latin America, Switzerland, and far beyond. The timeline of international play accelerated super fast. The very first international match took place in 1872 between England and Scotland. It was a peaceful 0-0 draw. However, when the first women's international game was played in 1881, also England versus Scotland, it faced severe backlash. Society highly frowned upon women playing, and during the return match, a crowd actually attacked the players, literally forcing them to flee the pitch in an omnibus. But despite those major societal hurdles, the global momentum of the sport was completely unstoppable. And that unstoppable momentum culminated in 1904, when FIFA was founded in Paris. At first, it was just 7 nations, but their primary role was to organize international matches. And it was this monumental federation that ultimately paved the way for the grandest global spectacle, uniting what is today 211 member associations under one single banner. And that global spectacle is Part 4, the ultimate spectacle. Now, what's really interesting here is the incredible story of the very first World Cup in 1930. It was a complete logistical nightmare for Europeans. Hosted by Uruguay to celebrate their centenary of independence, just getting there required a 2-week ship journey, which deterred a lot of teams. The final match between Uruguay and Argentina was so incredibly intense and rivaled that the referee actually demanded a security detail just to step onto the pitch. And get this, Because the teams couldn't agree, they actually used an Argentine ball for the first half and a Uruguayan ball for the second. Uruguay ended up winning that chaotic final 4-2. Fast forward a bit to 1950, and the scale of this spectacle had just absolutely exploded. Think about this massive number, 200,000. That represents the record stadium capacity at the Maracanã in Brazil for the 1950 World Cup final. And in front of that stunned, completely record-breaking audience, Uruguay defeated heavily favored Brazil 2-1. It was in this crucible of massive crowds and immense pressure that legendary players began to arrive, elevating the sport to a true art form. In 1958, a 17-year-old kid named Edson Arantes do Nascimento, better known to all of us as Pelé, burst onto the scene. He scored twice in the final against host nation Sweden, securing Brazil's first title and instantly cementing his status as one of the greatest to ever play the game. But as the World Cup grew in prominence, it frequently intersected with global politics. The source material outlines a few major events here. In 1969, high tensions following qualifying matches sparked a brief but deeply tragic 100-hour war between El Salvador and Honduras. Then in 1974, right in the middle of the Cold War, the tournament hosted the sole historic match between West and East Germany. And in 1976, a military dictatorship seized power in Argentina, who then hosted and won the subsequent World Cup amidst immense political controversy and suspicions of scheduling advantages. Let's move on and see how this builds into Part 5, the modern phenomenon. The technological and structural evolution in this era was incredibly swift. 1970 gave us the first color TV broadcasts, which actually prompted the creation of the iconic black and white Adidas Telstar ball, just so it was easier to see on the television screen. 1991 marked a massive structural leap, with the first Women's World Cup held in China. And jumping to 2022, the tournament's immense scale reached the desert nation of Qatar. Now, accompanying this massive global reach was a staggering, almost unbelievable exponential growth in player value over 3 decades. Just think about these numbers for a second. In 1982, Diego Maradona's record transfer was roughly 7 million euros. By 2001, Zinedine Zidane moved for 75 million euros. And in 2017, the transfer of Neymar commanded an astonishing 220 million euros. It perfectly reflects a hyper-commercialized modern game completely driven by TV rights and massive global investors. Of course, this immense scale and hyper-commercialization brings very complex realities, which became starkly visible during the 2022 Qatar World Cup. As detailed in our source material, hosting the event in a nation of 3 million required massive new infrastructure built by 2 million migrant workers. This endeavor was heavily accompanied by controversies, with NGOs denouncing serious human rights issues, including the confiscation of worker passports. Over a 10-year period, reports indicated that more than 6,500 workers died on World Cup construction sites, objectively highlighting the severe human cost behind the modern spectacle. Despite its complex and sometimes deeply turbulent history, the scale of participation today is just unfathomable. The sport currently boasts roughly 275 million players worldwide, and importantly, 13 million of those are women. Together, this global community generates a staggering 400 billion euros globally, absolutely cementing it as the most popular sport on the planet. Which leaves us with one final fascinating question. From a feather-filled ball in ancient China to a multi-billion-dollar global phenomenon, how does this living history continue to mirror the evolution of civilization itself? Because as we've seen today, football is far more than just a sport. It's a silent, enduring witness to our shared human history. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring the incredible narratives hiding right in front of us.